Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, distinguished guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen. I hope all of you are safe and in good health wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Elena Aurelia, and I'm an intern for the Power Fossil Fuel Alternative Energy and Storage Department of the ASEAN Centre for Energy. It is a pleasure to welcome you here in the launching of the ASEAN Energy and Gender Report. Aligning with this year's International Women's Day theme, Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow, ACE Through Accept believes that there is merit in advocating for women empowerment for a greater integration of women participation in various sectors of the industry, including the energy sector. Under the ASEAN Plan of Action for the Energy Cooperation, Phase 2, ranging from 2021 until 2025, ASEAN is also progressively pursuing a greater gender inclusivity in its action plans and programs. This is a shared aspiration reaffirmed in the 39th ASEAN Ministers of Energy meeting in 2021, the ASEAN Community Vision in 2025, as well as the 36th ASEAN Summit in 2020. And through this, we have fully recognized gender equality's pivotal role in achieving an inclusive, sustainable development and a just energy transition, which becomes the basis and the driving force behind our initiatives. This report is an initiative ACE continued from last year, previously gathering perspectives of senior women government officials from the 10 ministers of energy in ASEAN to commemorate International Women's Day. Today's webinar will present the findings from evaluating financial assistance received for gender and gender-energy related projects within the period of 2010 until 2019 in ASEAN. Through this report, we will dive into an intersection rarely discussed, unraveling the interplay between gender equality, energy access, and economic improvement, aiming to explore the question, have the government and donor institutions provide enough support for energy development initiatives in ASEAN that consider gender element in its program? For today's agenda, we will start the webinar with an opening session, followed with a presentation of the findings of the ASEAN Energy and Gender Report. And after that, we will dive into an in-depth discussion by inviting the experts through a panel discussion. To win live in this session, I'm also encouraging all participants to not only listen, but also engage in the live discussion by asking questions through the Q&A function in the control panel located at the bottom of your screen. So don't be shy to ask us anything, as I'm sure our speakers will be delighted to answer you. Now, without further ado, let us all welcome Ms. Christine Lins, the Executive Director of the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, to deliver the key message on welcoming this year's International Women's Day. Ms. Christine has over 25 years of experience in the field of renewable energy sources and energy efficiency, having worked at the REN 21 and the European Renewable Energy Council previously. Please, Ms. Christine, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, Elena, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's good morning from where I am. I'm joining you this morning from Austria, from Europe, and I am I'm gonna just share a couple of slides with you, but really just a few to guide you through the questions, what we can do to empower women to advance the global energy transition. I'm representing an organization called TWNet. It's a global network for women working in the energy transition space. We currently have over 2,500 members from 100+ countries. And we are a fairly young organization. We were founded in 2017. And why are we doing all this? We must bear in mind an energy transition is a complex process. It means a radical reform of existing energy supply and demand systems. But clearly this goes just beyond technical issues and replacing fossil with clean sources. It requires a large pool and a diverse pool of talents, and that's where we come in. And when you look at the latest figures, where you see that women in the global renewable energy workforce represent 12 million, when there are 12 million jobs globally in the renewable energy workforce, and when women only have a share of 32% of this part, which on the one hand you can say, yes, that's higher than the share of women in oil and gas, where it's only 22%. But when we see that these numbers are supposed to increase to 42 million jobs in 2050, it's absolutely clear that this industry will only function if we attract the best talents of both women and men. And this is exactly where we tap in. And that's why I also think that your report is really timely and looks at a very crucial issue, namely, this is not only something which is a statement, but we need to adjust our finances, our support programs to these findings and see that we really give justice to this. And we don't have harmonized data sets all around the world. That's why it's so important to look at things from different perspectives. And it's important to acknowledge the power of gender equality in economic terms. We see that global GDP would improve significantly through energy equality, but we also see that companies with diverse leadership have better financial and economic results. They are better prepared to survive financial shock. They have more action on environmental issues, more stringent decarbonization policies. And of course, it is a human right for women to have access to employment on equal terms with men. But when we see these figures, it's absolutely clear that this brings also a lot of economic advantages. And I think this is what we need to look into and tap into. And it's important to shed a light on this. There is not enough data out there, and in this sense, I really welcome today's launch of this report, because it's also important that you look at regional particularities. And I'm really honored to speak again at one of these ACE webinars, because I think it's really important that we all join forces. And I again welcome everybody who is interested in getting access to a global network of women in the energy space to join TWNet, to set up your profile on our website. And with this, I wish you well for today's webinar and look forward to hearing about the key findings. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Christine, for the wonderful speech. Moving along, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ms. Hilda Chitra Yusgiantoro, the chairperson of Purnomo Yusgiantoro Center, to deliver a keynote speech. Ms. Hilda, often speaking in national and international energy economic conferences, has also been involved in coordinating research related to energy economics, carbon tax implementation, and renewable energy development, among others. Ms. Hilda, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Honorable Christine Lins, the Executive Director of Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, distinguished authors of ASEAN Gender-Energy Report, Monica Merdekawati, Gabriela Iananto, Crescencia Valentina, and Helena Aurelia. Distinguished panelists, Batari Saraswati, and Ira Martina Drupadi, and Suhela Khan. Good afternoon here from Indonesia. I am pleased to join you today at the launching of the ASEAN Gender-Energy Report, Development Finance. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to deliver a keynote address at this important event. Women are closely connected with energy, especially women in Asian countries have an essential role in providing and using energy to support their families at home. In rural areas where there is no or lack of electricity, women generally will put effort to collect firewood for cooking and kerosene for lighting their homes. However, this type of traditional fuels like firewood and kerosene can negatively impact the woman's health and as well as the people in the same living space. Furthermore, women tend to have a lack of access to alternative and safer energy, and this eventually will lead to greater poverty. Access to adequate quality and affordable energy service will reduce poverty, of course, and also increase health and generate more income for the family. Recent research in several Asian countries, such as Cambodia, Philippines, and Myanmar, revealed that the increase of labor force participation from women will also increase the household decision-making and education significantly, and will reduce the inefficiency of cooking fuels. As we already mentioned, labor force participation as well, according to a report from the International Labor Organization, finding a job is much more challenging for women than it is for men. When women are employed, they tend to work in low quality jobs in vulnerable conditions, and there is little improvement shortly. Based on the data collected by the International Energy Agency report in 2021, less than 5% on top positions for the energy sector, such as chair of the board, CEO, president, are women, only 5%. Meanwhile, women hold only 13.9% of senior managers in energy-related sectors, with representation strongest in the utility sector. This number is marginally lower than from non-energy industries, which is represented at 15.5%. In contrast, 25% of firms show no evidence of women senior managers. So overall, those numbers show that women's participation in the energy sector workforce remains low globally, as well as their role as leading actors in the energy sector. In Indonesia, actually, there are two main factors that contributed to the low number based from the point of view from the Indonesian Women's Commission. Mostly are from instilled culture perceptions in society, which mostly are difficult to break. First, engineering is perceived as a difficult work for women. Hence, there is a lack of women's interest to work in the energy-intensive engineering sector. Second, women in rural areas are perceived as the main caregiver for the family members in the house. Hence, most perceive the women do not or will not understand about energy. If we look at the energy sector workforce nowadays, actually there are significant efforts for creating a safe environment for women and promoting gender diversity, but there are gaps that remain to be improved. Women should have the same opportunity and strategic position as men in the sector. Women evidently play a key role as agents of change and decision makers as well in the energy sector. Therefore, education and empowerment are two important factors in increasing women's bargaining power in taking part in a household decision to adopt like clean energy through creation of awareness. It can also provide excellent opportunities for women to participate more in the labor market. So as all we know already right now, the global energy trend is moving towards the low carbon energy. Hence, to achieve this emission reduction target, the development of new and renewable energy needs to be enhanced. Not limited to that, the optimization of NRE utilization could also make a positive contribution to countries' energy security. For Indonesia, actually the government has proposed several strategies and roadmaps, particularly targeting the transportation and power sector to accelerate NRE development and to achieve net zero emissions in 2060 or sooner. In the near future, electric vehicles and green fuel will dominate the world's transportation, while NRE sources such as solar, wind, and hydro will hold the key to global electricity. So given the growth of NRE and the advanced technologies and innovation in Asia, this could be an opportunity for women to promote equitable participation. The special characteristics of women, which are empathy, flexibility, intuition, humanity, and passion. If it is combined with environmental and energy literacy, women's power to encourage energy transition becomes very impactful. The energy transition is not only about technology innovation, but also social, economic, and regulation innovation in which women are generally involved in this multidisciplinary process. So in a fast rising energy demand worldwide, especially in Asian countries, a supportive financing dedicated to gender equality and women's empowerment in the energy field should be increased and enhanced. Standards and policies need to be more consistently applied and initiated for forms of financing, such as the development finance. So following the SDGs 5 on achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls, investors and partners need to maximize the quality and quantity of funding. Also, it is aligned with the SDG 7, which will increase women's participation, which provides access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. A recent research taken by the Purnama Yusgiantoro Center about crowdfunding in the energy sector shows that there is enormous potential of using crowdfunding to finance green, health, and education projects. And this does not rule out the possibility of including women empowerment. So a synergy between parties to facilitate empowerment and involvement of women in the local communities is one of the keys to optimally harnessing the NRE potentially, particularly in rural areas. Workshops and training can significantly assist to improve the capabilities of women in energy. So in other words, equipping women with energy-related skills and involving them in a project will allow them to participate more actively in the sustainable development agenda and also benefit the welfare of all parties. Finally, I would like to express my appreciation and gratitude to the ASEAN Centre of Energy through Asian Climate Change and Energy Project for providing its recommendation on an effective way to improve women's empowerment in the energy sector, a way through development finance. Congratulations on the launching of the report. We believe that the report can provide beneficial insights and effective recommendations for policymakers to make gender equality a central goal of policies and practice in the energy sector. Happy International Women's Day as well for all the participants, women here joining us today.
Thank you for the insightful keynote speech, Ms. Vilda. Now, before we continue, I would like to invite all speakers to turn on your camera so we can take a picture together. So please, for the speakers who haven't turned on their camera, right. So I will be taking the screenshot right now in 3, 2, 1, cheers. All right, sweet. Now, I guess it's time to get back to business if the PowerPoint can be up again. Right, okay. To proceed with the agenda, I would like to invite our moderator for the next session, Ms. Gabriela Iananto. Ms. Gabriela is the Associate Officer of the Power, Fossil Fuel, Alternative Energy and Storage Department, as well as the Associate Communications and Media Officer at ACE. Previously, she was a research assistant at the Center for Energy and Environmental Chemistry in Germany. Ms. Gaby, passing the floor to you.
Thank you, Helena, for your kind introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, distinguished guests and participants. My name is Gabriela Inanto. I'm the Associate Officer of PFS Department at ACE, and I'm honored to be here as the moderator for this event today. So aligning with this year's International Women's Day theme, Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow, ACE through ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or ACCEPT, believes that there is merit in advocating for women empowerment, for greater integration of women participation in various sectors of the industry, including the energy sector. Last year, during the month of International Women's Day, ACE gathered the perspectives of senior women government officials from the 10 ASEAN Ministries of Energy. And this year, the initiative is continued with the ASEAN Energy and Gender Report Development Finance. So without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Monica as the lead author of the report to present the key findings of the report. Ms. Monica Merdekawati is an officer of Sustainable Energy, Renewable Energy, and Energy Efficiency Department at ASEAN Centre for Energy, with 5 years of experience in renewable energy. She is also research analyst of ACCEPT project, responsible for the engagement with government officials, various studies covering the renewable energy and energy efficiency investment, and ASEAN's energy policy. Prior to ACE, she was a developer of wind and solar farms in Indonesia. Her research interest includes energy and climate policy and energy economics. She holds a Master of Science degree in Mechanical Engineering from University of Southampton, United Kingdom. Ms. Monica, please, the time is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Thank you, Gabriela, for the kind introduction. Hello, good afternoon from Jakarta. I am Monica Merdekawati. It is my pleasure to share the key insights of the ASEAN Energy and Gender Report with the focus on development finance, hopefully within the next 15 minutes. Okay, next slide, please. So let's begin with the overview of the contents of this report. It comprises of 4 main topics. They are the interplay between gender equality, energy access, and economic empowerment. This section is to emphasize the importance of discussing energy and gender programs. The second is the success stories of energy and gender energy access programs in ASEAN. From the third section, we focus on analyzing the flow of development finance that are dedicated for energy and gender programs in ASEAN. Then in the last part, we compare the gap between ASEAN and other regions. Next slide, please. So why we at ACE, ASEAN Centre for Energy, have this initiative? First, it is declared in the 39th ASEAN Ministers of Energy meeting last year that the regional priority to enhance the energy resilience and improve energy security, and thereby forming a foundation for an inclusive and just energy transition. This aspiration complements the 36th ASEAN Summit in 2020, at which ASEAN leaders recognized gender equality as pivotal to achieving the 3 pillars of sustainable development. They are social, economic, and environmental aspects. Here at ACE, through the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or ACCEPT, has promoted the importance of women's empowerment in the energy sector since 2019 through various initiatives. One of them is in 2020, ACCEPT achieved a higher share of women researchers, up from 50% at the beginning of the project. And last year, senior female government officials from the 10 ASEAN member states, with the Norway's Minister of Petroleum and Energy, also contributed their perspectives on the vital role that women have as agents of change toward a low carbon society, which is available in our website here. Next slide, please. So many of us must have been already realized, perhaps through our mother, that women hold a central role in the society. In the smallest unit of your community, which is family, women are the caretakers who are responsible for the education and health, and also responsible for seemingly normal activities like cooking, laundry, helping schoolwork, and etc., which all require energy. And many studies have been carried out to help us understand this causal relationship, the woman's access to energy and poverty. And here in ASEAN, the ASEAN Gender Outlook Report that was published in 2021 is the first publication that presents a detailed assessment of gender disparities across SDG and indicators. The outlook describes alarming gender inequality, where these disparities are greatly felt by the poorest women belonging to the ethnic minorities living in the rural areas. A few indicators that I would like to highlight is the third of ASEAN people still lack access to clean cooking fuels, and in ASEAN's total labor force, the participation rate of women was only 56% compared to 79% for men. Of employed women, 67% work in the informal sector and 3% live below the poverty line, despite having regular income. And in the energy sector, the employment rate of women is even lower. Only 8% are engaged in the production of crude oil, petroleum products, and also natural gas. In other words, women gain very few economic benefits from the fossil fuel industry, despite the rapid growth of the energy demand itself. From these statistics, when we think the other way around, so providing clean energy access to women offers potential multiplier effects, whereby the role of women could evolve from just a consumer to entrepreneur and later becoming leaders, as illustrated here. And similar progress could be expected in the energy provision, starting from the small equipment such as kerosene or solar PV lamps, to small rooftop PV panels, or to mini hybrid electricity generator sets, and before progressing to connection to the national grids. Next slide, please. So here I would like to briefly share a few successful energy gender access programs in ASEAN. Here to categorize them, the programs that are initiated by GERES in Cambodia and Myanmar were able to create additional jobs in local community through providing improved cookstoves, which later grows into providing solar home system and energy efficient appliances. In Indonesia, here, these energy access programs were able to be replicated as a social entrepreneurship, where local nonprofit organizations such as IBEKA, Yayasan Rumah Energi of Biru Program, and also Copernic were once started with the development finance to cover the upfront costs, able to develop small-scale energy access programs where they can be capitalized, as such the case of Biru Program. And I would like to also highlight IBEKA as the IBEKA as the embodiment of successful social entrepreneurship, with a woman at the top leadership, Ibu Tri Mumpuni. And in Philippines and Vietnam, the energy access programs have been able to grow into community-based renewable energy. For instance, in Philippines, a local NGO, CBAT, established a micro hydropower community since 2003 in Tinglayan. And in Vietnam, Green ID piloted the rooftop solar program in 90 households in Hanoi and 40 households in Da Nang since 2018. Next slide, please. Now we are talking about the development finance. So the report is based on the data of 8 member states who are eligible for the development finance according to the OECD's classification. The data is sourced from the OECD's credit reporting system, or CRS, where the information of type of financial instruments such as loan or grants, the donors, whether it is from bilateral or multilateral channel, and the purpose were extracted. Then the analysis was focused on the comparison of development finance for projects that are marked by gender tag 1 or 2, One meanings has a principal objective towards gender, and two means significant. And the comparison for the energy projects. And lastly, the core of this report is to analyze the development finance for both gender and energy programs. Next slide, please. So from our analysis shows that from the total of 707.1 million USD was spent for the energy and gender programs between 2010 until 2019, of which it is only 3.3% of total that is devoted to energy projects only, and only 2.7% of total for gender projects only. So here the figure indicates that significant increase can be observed in 2014, and the sharp jump is in 2016. The main recipient of the energy and gender funding was Vietnam, with 90.4% over the past 10 years. Minor shares were observed in the Indonesia at 3% and Myanmar at 2.7%. And the annual trend indicates that the funding to Indonesia was prioritized in early years, but starting in 2014, most of the funding went to Vietnam. And a notable increase in funding also can be seen in Myanmar, started in 2018. Yeah, next slide, please. Further investigation into more detailed objectives indicates that most of the energy and gender projects, 94%, were related to coal-fired power plants, which is quite surprising. Another 20.4% went towards the improvement of electric power transmission and distribution in the centralized grids. And although the energy access was not explicitly monitored in the OECD's CRS, this objective may fall under the minority categories here, which is the energy generation for multiple renewable energy technologies, biofuel-fired power plant, hydro, and solar. Next slide, please. So to obtain a clearer view of energy and gender access programs, the analysis is extended by omitting the financing for coal-fired power plants and the improvement of transmission and distribution, which was allocated mostly to Vietnam. Here we can see that the financing of energy generation of multiple renewable energy was spent mostly in Cambodia. And while biofuels is mostly in Vietnam, hydroelectric also in Vietnam, and solar power is in Myanmar. Next slide, please. So the funding for energy and gender access project could reach 76 million US dollar over the last 10 years, or equivalent to the total of categories that is presented here. Unlike the overall trend, the increase in potential funding for energy access in particular was more gradual, as reflected here in comparison to the general trend. It peaked in 2014 at 18.8 million and dropped to US 5.3 million in 2016, then returned back into the 16 million in the 2017 until 2019. The funding for energy generation for multiple renewable technology accounted for the large share in 2011, 2018, and also 2019, while for biofuel in 2018, and for the hydropower in 2014, 2015, and also 2017. Next slide, please. Over the past 10 years, development finance for energy and gender programs was mobilized mainly in the form of ODA grants and loans only, among others. ODA loans dominated with 88.4%, but from 2010 until 2013, the ODA grants were the common type of financing until the ODA loans rapidly increased in 2014. the level of ODA grants remain around at 10 million US dollar per year. In other words, the yearly change is mainly contributed by the ODA loans between 2014 until 2019. This graph also indicates that almost all the ODA loans were allotted to Vietnam, while the ODA grants were relatively more equal distributed among the other AMS. Next slide, please. And in ASEAN, energy and gender projects were predominantly supported by bilateral agreements over the past decade. Significant contribution of multilateral funding is also observed in 2014, 2015, and 2019. This figure also indicates that bilateral finance was always the major source, except in the 2014 to 2015. And next slide, please. Here we can see that Japan was the principal donor of the bilateral assistance over the past decade, with significant contributions between 2016 until 2019. And the second place was Germany. And then among the AMS, we have like a principal donor in each member states, like Vietnam received the most funding from Japan, and then Germany predominantly in Cambodia and Myanmar, United States in Indonesia, Australia in Law PDR, and United Kingdom in Myanmar. Next slide, please. So despite this minority share, multilateral donors also important. As can be seen in the figure here, most of the multilateral assistance come from the ASEAN Development Bank, while the other two agencies are Global Environment Facility and also Global Green Growth Institute. Next slide, please. So while the development financing for energy and gender projects in ASEAN increased over the decade, there was still a huge gap compared to other regions, as reflected here. From the overall budget spent in the world, like 11.4 billion, ASEAN received only 6.2% of it, which was very small share. If of that given to Asia as a whole is 35%, and also Africa is to 29%. Next slide, please. And a focused view into each objective is provided here. Surprisingly, ASEAN is the only region. Okay. Oh yeah, ASEAN is the am I audible? Sorry. Hello. Okay, let me continue.
Yes.
So yeah, audible. Yeah. Okay. So surprisingly, ASEAN is the only region that acquired such a large amount for the coal-fired power plants, which also surprisingly have gender element in its program, which we should look at that. And then in the previous section pointed out that most of these assistance went to Vietnam. However, for the rest of the category, ASEAN is lacking in comparison to the other regions. Next slide, please. So a closer look at ASEAN countries that have similar energy problems like ASEAN member states emphasize the shortfall of assistance in these categories. They are energy generation of multiple renewable energy technology, biofuel, hydro, and solar power plant. Next slide, please. Here, the figure also shows that, I would like to point out the categories that is still unexplored for the ASEAN case, in which most of it are related to the energy access issue, such as energy conservation and demand side efficiency, energy education or training, energy research, geothermal energy, hybrid, and also non-renewable waste-fired power plants. Next slide, please. So now we have come to the last slide to conclude. The development finance for energy and gender programs in ASEAN is still low in comparison of the total that are allocated to the energy or gender projects. and relatively low in comparison to other regions with many unexplored categories that most are related to the energy access program. Meaning the problem itself still remains. Women are the most affected, and it remains crucial that regional and national initiatives place special attention on vulnerable groups of women and girls. Hence, the strategy here is required. Gender equality must be addressed separately and utilized as a catalyst to advance in economic recovery and energy transition, of which we recommend these 5 points to form the ASEAN roadmap to achieve gender equality, implement gender-specific indicators to accurately monitor the progress, and to formulate adequate regulatory frameworks to encourage women participation, to deploy more renewable energy projects in energy and gender projects, and also to encourage public-private partnership to implement impactful gender-based CSR programs. I think that would conclude my presentation, and back to you, Gabriela.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Monica, for the comprehensive presentation. If I may ask a question on your presentation, how exactly can we identify the energy projects that have gender objective? Would you please elaborate more on that?
Yeah, so from the OECD CRS, the credit reporting system, basically OECD itself already have a system to like monitor the or categorize the financial flow to which category they are impacting to, and then in the screening process, I would say in the screening process, OECD have that kind of a gender assessment, gender marker tool, which basically to identify the project that have a positive impact on advancing gender equality or not, where the classification are like I mentioned before, there are 3, which is not targeted, significant, or principal. And screening the funding against the policymaker is voluntary for the node. So there is also the case that donors can also choose to leave the reporting blank. So that's why in OECD database there are type of the projects that marked as not screened. So basically, yeah, that's how it is to read the OECD database to really know which one goes to the gender or not, and that's how the process they categorize it. I hope this answers your question.
Thank you, Ms. Monica. Also, we have a couple of questions. I will take one and I will read it from Ms. Eva Wolandari. The question is on how the connection will be improved among the energy, women leadership, and development finance, especially in remote areas, which will directly impact to the welfare and productivity. So, Ms. Monica?
So how the connection will be improved among the energy, women? So I would say like I previously described, it will start from the smallest community, like you are focusing on the woman that is predominantly as the consumer, to have first give them the access to the clean energy itself. And then so by that, women can have more time basically to do other things, because the time that is needed to do their daily activities is become more efficient. So they have time, for example, to do the side job like making foods or local craft. So from that, they will grow into the entrepreneur field, like whichever suit the local culture and circumstances. And then from that, it will also open the access to women for women to learn from yeah, because they open themselves to in entrepreneurship activities, right? So they would be able to learn more from their surroundings and then grow and to be educated more. I would say the key is education here. And then by that, they can enter the formal sector for the employment, and then there they can take the leadership. And yeah, that's how I see they can be the woman leadership in the remote areas, and definitely will impact the welfare and productivity because we have more women basically. Then I hope this answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Miss Monica. Uh, Speaking of this development finance report, I took a note earlier in during your presentation in slide 5 about the methodology. What is the meaning of 1 and 2 marker that were mentioned earlier? If you could elaborate more on that.
Yeah. So the marker 1 or 2 is a method that the OECD use to mark the projects whether they are principally targeting the gender equality or not. So how OECD put the marker 1 or 2 is by looking into the background of the project and also overall specific objectives and also the activities or performance of the project itself. So if 1, the implication to the budget would be roughly around 40% of it is for the gender objectives, and then for 2, meaning it's principally targeting the gender. So in the budget perspective, it would be like around 100% of the budget is directed to the gender objective. So hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Ms. Monica. I think we can be sure that this report will be a very insightful one. So I think the audience can wait for the report and read in detail about this development finance. And yeah. So moving on to the next agenda, now we would like to hear more on some deeper insights from 3 incredible women who have been working in the energy sector. Please welcome Ms. Batari Saraswati, Ms. Ira Martina Drupadi, and Ms. Suhala Khan. Thank you so much for being here with us. I believe that your insights will further empower women and thus advancing the energy transition, especially in ASEAN. So before proceeding with the panel discussion, I would like to invite each of the panelists to give a short introduction. And perhaps we can start with Ms. Batari first. So Ms. Batari Saraswati is Head of Corporate Planning and Risk Management in PT Surya Semesta Indonesia Tbk, or SSIA. SSIA is a holding company with business portfolio in property, construction, and hospitality. The company is currently developing Subang Smartpolitan, a new 2,000-hectare green state-of-the-art industrial estate in West Java. In SSIA, Ms. Batari is in charge with strategic planning, including developing and executing sustainability roadmap in the company. Prior to SSIA, she was an engagement manager in PwC strategy. She graduated from Bandung Institute of Technology and Tokyo Institute of Technology. Please, Ms. Batari, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gabriela. First, let me thank ASEAN Centre for Energy for this great seminar. It's amazing to be here with these panels of great professionals in the launching of ASEAN Energy and Gender Report Development Finance. I think Ms. Monica explained in great extent about the status of development finance in regards to gender energy program. The report finding shows that there is little attention to gender energy program, meaning that there is a significant room for improvement in the future to further integrate gender issues into the energy sectors. And I think we all here agree that this is an important topic. It's necessary to address gender in the energy sectors since energy access and energy transitions are not gender neutral. since women and men have different access to energy, have different needs for energy and different uses of energy. Moreover, it's also critical to identify the status and gaps in terms of project or development financing. So at the end of the day, we can accelerate clean energy transition in a more inclusive and sustainable way. And thank you for the kind introductions. To add on to the introductions, Surya Semesta Internusa is a holding company, and our main business encompasses property development, construction services, and hospitality services. And decarbonization's clean energy transitions is a critical step toward global climate action. And this is especially relevant to the property and construction sectors, which account for a significant amount of carbon emissions. We have taken measures and plan to continue to increase investment in smart energy management technologies and generating and procuring clean energy for our property. We are currently developing a 2,700 hectare of new city in West Java. And this is an integrated township that is built with smart and sustainable concept from the ground up. And the next slide, please. The key features of Subang Smart Province will be the use of renewable energy, water and power efficient technologies to promote sustainable living as an effort to build a more sustainable future. So thank you. I think that's the introduction from my side, and look forward to a productive discussion in regards to energy, gender, and development finance.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Batari, for your short introduction. Moving on to the next panelist, we have Ms. Ira. Ms. Ira Martina Drupadi is an energy and climate expert with close to 20 years of experience in the field. As a research associate at the Energy Studies Institute, National University of Singapore, Ms. Ira's research examines policy and legal or regulatory frameworks for energy transition and low carbon technologies at the national and global levels. She is also part of the team representing NUS as an observer at UNFCCC meetings. Prior to joining NUS, Ms. Ira managed an $8 million Australian climate assistance program for the government of Indonesia in her role as Green Economic Development Advisor at the Australia-Indonesia Partnership for Economic Governance. Ms. Ira, passing the floor to you.
Sorry. Okay, so thank you, Gabriela. Good afternoon, keynote speakers, report authors, my fellow panelists, and also members of the audience. Good afternoon from Singapore, and belated Happy International Women's Day. I'd like to congratulate the ASEAN Centre for Energy, and also thank you for inviting me to be part of this very esteemed panel to launch a very timely study for our ASEAN region. That is the meaningful integration of a gender perspective into energy access projects in ASEAN and how to finance them better. It's truly a privilege for me to be able to speak about a topic very close to my heart and learn from the experiences of my fellow panelists. So thank you for that. Just a small introduction on the Energy Research Institute, which I represent. Maybe the next slide. Yeah. So ESI is a research institute of the National University of Singapore. Compared to some of the other research institutes in the region represented in this event today, and even amongst research institutes in NUS itself, we are relatively young, having only been established in 2007. So that was about 15 years ago. However, we have a very important role to play in Singapore, being the only research institute focusing on energy policy in our country. Our research work is both inward-looking, that is focusing on Singapore's key energy policy challenges, as well as outward-looking, that is understanding and examining the energy policy landscape and its many challenges regionally as well as globally. And energy being a cross-cutting issue across many policy areas, our institute has broad expertise to analyze the intersection of energy with other policy issues in business, economics, engineering, law, natural and social sciences, and others. And naturally, we also contribute toward promoting discussion and advancing stakeholder dialogue on gender and development sector issues in the energy sector. So as concerns the topic at hand, I am certainly looking forward to exchanging views with my fellow panelists and the audience. So I won't front load my thoughts here, but in the tradition of my alma mater, the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, allow me to highlight 3 points. Firstly, as our colleagues at the ASEAN Centre for Energy have highlighted, women in the majority of ASEAN member states continue to bear the burden of energy poverty in their communities. And this has rarely been a focus, or rather not enough of a focus, for research and policy interventions. And with the deadline to achieve SDGs just shy of 8 years away, we cannot talk about achieving SDG 7, that is to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all, without talking about meaningful ways to ensure the participation and empowerment of women. So that's clear. And to do so, we also need to move away from the discourse that gender equality is solely a woman's issue. Equally limiting is the perspective that gender inequality only concerns supporting the traditional role of women in the household, or empowering women as an economic input in production, or in terms of women as victims of gender-based violence, for example. These are all really important issues for sure, but gender inequality is a human rights issue and is intersectional. It affects both men and women and other marginalized groups in our society. And it has implications across a broad range of policy areas. So it's not just energy, but also public health, the environment, climate change, education, to name a few. Sadly, women remain at the bottom rung in many of these areas as well. But what is important to note is that women are not only victims, women have demonstrated time and again plenty of agencies in energy poor communities, even if they lack the formal recognition and the policy enabling environment. So in the context of energy policy, our failure as ASEAN member states to include a meaningful gender perspective in energy access has translated into a lack of financial commitment from our development partners. So in order for more development finance to be directed toward gender-related energy projects, we in the ASEAN region need to provide this leadership. And lastly, while we all recognize the normative role ASEAN plays in foregrounding gender issues in energy policy, we need to do more in terms of implementation at the national level. Development financing for gender-related energy projects will continue on this piecemeal trajectory that has been highlighted by the report that we are launching if ASEAN member states continue to treat this as a peripheral issue. Gender inequality and energy access is not a peripheral issue. I think we can all agree. And here I feel there is an opportunity for our political leaders and decision makers to play a more assertive role vis-a-vis our development partners at bilateral and multilateral levels. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ira, for your short but comprehensive introduction. So last but definitely not least, I'm inviting Ms. Suhela for her short introduction. So Ms. Suhela Khan leads Women's Economic Empowerment Portfolio at UN Women in India. She has an extensive experience in management of large-scale transformational programs on women's economic empowerment. She aims to integrate feminist principles and strategies in programs to enable women to recognize and challenge discrimination and gender-based violence as a prerequisite to advance their economic rights. Her expertise lies in the areas of program development, implementation, monitoring, measuring impact, and partnership building. Ms. Suhela, please, the time is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gabriela, and a very good afternoon from India to all of you. I represent UN Women, and for those who are not aware about UN Women, it's a United Nations organization that works for women's empowerment and gender equality. And right now I lead a program called We Empower Asia. And this program aims at working very closely with the corporate sector to make their policies and programs more gender responsive. And we, as our program, also work with a lot of renewable energy companies to see that how it is possible to look at their existing policies and practices to get more women in the leadership positions in the organization. Previously in this role, I've also led a program called Women's Entrepreneurship for Sustainable Energy, which aims at enhancing women's participation in the energy value chains in India. Now, one of the learnings that we had from that project was that we really wanted to understand what are the challenges that these women-led enterprises in energy face in terms of their access to finance. And we noticed a few points. One was that bankers really have placed a very low confidence in women energy enterprises. Firstly, of course, there is a unconscious bias in terms of lending to women when it comes to any project. But when it is an energy specific project, the bias become more substantial. And they said that that they do not have much confidence in women being able to take up certain financial decisions and financial products. So in India, we faced a lot of issues in terms of possession of documents for them to be able to access those loans or financial services, and pre-existing connection with the banks, which in case of women is mostly not there. If you're talking about women from rural areas or women from those communities which have been marginalized for years, these women do not simply meet the criteria that that bankers lay down. And we also found that there was a lack of awareness among women as well on the benefits and cost effectiveness of renewable energy financial products. For example, we came across this organization called SEVA, which is Self-Employed Women's Association, and we found that they have developed very particular energy products, financial products that offer a very low interest rate. But still, it required a lot of community mobilization and a lot of awareness among the women to start using these financial products, and also and then consequently increase demand for such products. So these are my preliminary thoughts when it comes to access to finance or access to credit by women who are trying to access them in order to develop their energy interventions. So I'll take a pause here and look forward to the continued conversation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Suhela. So I would like to kindly remind all participants that if you have any questions, please feel free to drop it in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and the panelists will be answering your questions directly or during the discussion. So, Ms. Batari, if I can start the panel discussion with you. Working as the head of corporate planning in the business industry, especially in property, construction, and hospitality, where it is male-dominated, how do you see women's involvement in this sector? Like, what is the role of women in the energy transition, and why is it so important?
Yeah, thank you for the questions, Gabriela. I think women involvement in the business industry is always vital. As mentioned by one of our keynote speech, Christine Lin, that there is a strong business case of having enough female representation in organizations. As of 2021, our company employ a total of 2,441 employees, of which 20% are female. And these definitely serve as a room for improvement. And in general, due to the nature of the business, i.e. construction and real estate development, it lends itself to a larger proportion of men in the workforce. However, given a strong business case for having gender diversities and having significant representation of women in an organizations, we see this as an increasingly important. As of 2021, 28% of our executive level are female. And there is a growing body of evidence that links increased gender equality with stronger business outcomes, more innovations, higher productivity in an organizations. And I think that rings true because having gender diversity can bring different perspectives. A multiplicity of perspective and voices can increase creativity and innovations and help organizations to spot and face new opportunities, and also creating a product that are inclusive, not only for men, but also for women. And having a gender balance teams also help an organization to connect better with customers, with stakeholders. And regarding to your questions, to the role of women in energy transitions, similar with property and constructions, I think energy sector has been traditionally been male dominated. However, this is hopefully changing, and we need to continue to ensure equal representation of women to accelerate the energy transitions. And why it is important? Because clean energy transitions will require innovative solutions and business models to be adopted, and greater participation from a diverse talent pool. And now women are increasingly serving as change agents throughout the energy sector value chains, and not only as a consumers, but women are now taking part as energy professionals, as the decision makers. And for example, in the context of energy access, as an energy consumers and active agents, engaging women in deploying of grid renewable energy solutions is known to improve sustainability and outcomes. So having this female perspective is critical throughout the energy sector's value chains. I hope that answers your questions, Gabriela.
Thank you very much, Ms. Batari. Although it is important to get women involved more in the energy sector, we can see how low the percentage is. So, Ms. Ira, being a gender and energy enthusiast since 2010, I learned that you have done plenty of research on the role of women in energy development in several countries, such as in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Would you mind telling us more about this? What are the common major obstacles in ASEAN that hinders the progression of gender equality in the energy sector?
Thank you, Gabriela. There are obviously many issues that one can learn from the role of women in energy access projects across Asia. Your study actually confirms conclusions that I have been able to draw thus far from my own research work on gender and energy at the community level in these countries. That is, yes, it is true that many studies have been carried out on energy access and gender. However, this research work has focused largely on South Asian countries. Very little work has focused specifically on the energy need gaps in Southeast Asian countries. And moreover, the research has focused mainly on rural communities. However, as we know, energy poverty is also an issue in urban communities where the population concentration is much more intense. Certainly, there is much to learn from the experiences of our counterparts in South Asia. And in fact, there are many innovations that they have pioneered, which have applications, direct applications in Southeast Asia. However, as part of the epistemic community in the region, we also need to put in more effort to understand the specific context and energy needs in Southeast Asia. And I think at the moment, ASEAN member states are fertile ground for more empirical research to be undertaken on the role of women in energy access innovations. Also, as your report pointed out, women do perform an integral role in their communities. And in the context of energy access, the irony is that women bear the brunt of energy poverty, but at the same time, they often play an active role and even spearhead efforts to alleviate energy poverty issues in their community. And yet, energy access projects tend to treat women as victims without much agency, a demographic that needs to be saved, when in actual fact, they are pioneers in their communities oftentimes. So what hinders progress toward energy inequality, gender equality and energy access in this regard is perhaps this lack of formal recognition and support from communities regarding, and as well as government policies, of course, when it comes to strengthening the role of women. As you know, oftentimes energy and climate policies are decidedly gender neutral, and this doesn't, this doesn't help in terms of providing that meaningful gender lens when it comes to developing energy access projects. I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ira. Speaking of major obstacles, the Women's Economic Empowerment Portfolio at UN Women in India is aiming to empower women to recognize and challenge discrimination and to advance their economic rights. So, Ms. Suhela, based on your experience, what is the challenge and main barrier that women face in entering the energy sector? Like you mentioned earlier about these women having unconscious bias themselves before contributing to the energy sector. Could you please elaborate more on this?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. This is very important for even us to recognize, the kind of constraints women face. So we identified predominantly two. One was the skill gap, and second one is the structural constraints. These two challenges were really the biggest obstacle in terms of enabling women to participate in energy value chains. So, for example, we did interview a lot of energy enterprises in various states and tried to understand from them that what is it that is failing them in hiring more women in different positions within their organizations. And one of the responses, predominant responses, was around socio-cultural issues in India, at least. And I'm assuming that this is the case with most developing countries as well. What we also found is that most distributors and retailers they were willing to hire more women because the women can act as brings that high market potential because of their connectivity with other women in the areas, right? But what they felt is that these women did lack the technical knowledge which is required for the upkeep, say for example, maintenance and care of renewable energy products such as solar lanterns, for example. So they felt that if these women had more skills, then it would be easier for these distributors and retailers to get them on board in terms of distribution and marketing of their products and services. Also, when we did a landscaping study of the policy environment as well, and one thing that came across very strongly was that energy policies do not always intentionally focus on women as stakeholders. They would target as women as beneficiaries, but not any policy had main focus on women, which is related to involvement of women more into any productive aspect. So if I talk about, in India, if we look at the policy which is around Ujjwala scheme, that is an amazing scheme which provides access to free cylinders to women for meeting out their cooking needs. But again, this is very much limited to their domestic work. If you would look at the policies related to solar, say for example, irrigation pumps and things like that, you would hardly see a focus on women operating in this space, or what are the specific needs that women have when it comes to using the energy products for their productive activities. So these were some of the challenges. And what we also realized when it comes to conscious and unconscious bias, this is not only prevalent among women themselves. Of course, this is all there in the ecosystem. And this is not only true for rural women, but women across, that they really tend to downplay their potential, and they self-doubt their abilities, and blame themselves for challenges that they face due to structural constraints, both in their personal and professional lives. So with rural women, the additional challenge that we faced in terms of these biases is really viewing themselves as economic actors, viewing themselves as citizens, rather than just a mother, a wife, a daughter, or a sister, but recognize their contribution, their active contribution to economic activities and productive activities. So these were all sorts of challenges that we we identified when we were trying to implement this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Suhela. Well, as we all know, women hold a central role in society. We're the ones who are responsible for daily activities such as cooking, doing laundry, cleaning, and other works that require a large amount of energy. And this energy demand for household necessities is the driver of a nation's economy. That being said, ensuring clean energy access for women is crucial. However, this is where it gets interesting. Gender dynamics, particularly gender roles and power struggles between men and women, are often overlooked when energy access is being discussed. So relating to the gender dynamics, Ms. Battery, if I can circle back to you, what role do men specifically have in uplifting women's energy access, and how does it affect the economic sector? What do you think?
That's a great question, Gabriela. I think men definitely have an active role. I think, and by understanding first, I think by understanding that men and women have different access to energy, different needs for energy, and different uses of energy, and I think I want to highlight regarding the employment opportunities. Like there are new renewable energy projects which leads to new employment opportunities. However, it's not balanced between men and women. I think there are underlying issues for this. I think regarding technical skills, regarding the conscious unconscious bias that Suhela also already mentions. I think the role of men here. I think there are two ways how men can help uplifting women's energy access. One is in the context of gender conscious workplace, helping creating practical strategies that promote gender equity, such as hiring policies and making sure that the hiring policies are not leaning towards specific specific employment, but more inclusive to men and women. And two is by having a more gender responsive actions in which the organization has in place requisite elements, gender equality visions, gender sensitive operational manuals, and as well as trainings, mentorships that uplift both men and women.
Thank you, Ms. Battery. Ms. Ira, with your 20 years experience in the energy sector, I'm just wondering, what is your thought on this?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, obviously, men have a very important role to play as, allies of uplifting women's energy access. And if you view it just from the economic perspective, obviously, if you are holding back the economic contribution of half the society, the entire society will suffer, right? And as your report has pointed out, and also as my fellow panelists have pointed out, men are pretty much still in the decision-making positions in their communities, in businesses, in the economy more broadly, as well as at the political level. So this is, they have a very big role to play to level that playing field with regards to the participation of women in energy access projects, and not just participation, but also to promote them into the decision-making roles that will help to mitigate these gender imbalances that are currently existent in our energy policies.
Thank you, Ms. Ira. It is clear now that there is a strong connection between gender equality, energy access, and economic development. The three must go hand in hand to advance the energy transition. Then the big question is, what are some factors that are commonly overlooked in forming policy frameworks that promote a higher gender integration in ASEAN's energy sector? Ms. Ira, may I start with you again?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yes. So what are some factors that are commonly overlooked in forming policy frameworks that promote a higher gender integration in ASEAN's energy?
Yes, sorry. As I think Suhela was mentioning, and I think Ms. Batari was also mentioning, that when it comes to energy access projects, often the focus is very much on kind of strengthening the role of women in the domestic sphere, but so that we call the practical energy, the practical roles that women play in energy access. But there is not enough emphasis given to kind of expanding on the strategic roles of women in energy access. So that goes beyond women contributing to the economy, but also women playing a larger political socio-political role in their communities, being in decision-making powers in their communities, participating in the political policy process. These are, I think, areas that are often overlooked in energy policy because especially when it comes to energy access, the focus seems more, once electrification is in place, then it kind of just stops short there without looking at what are the more gender-specific energy needs that have still not been addressed through policies like electrification.
Thank you, Ms. Ira. Going back to Ms. Suhela, how important is it to create gender-specific policies on energy access? What do you think?
I mean, this is a no-brainer. Of course, we should have a gender-specific, gender-responsive, gender-transformative policies. And there is a close interplay between gender equality, energy access, and economic empowerment. So until and unless our policies address, target gender equality goals in a very conscious manner in any policy, it's very, very difficult to reach out to the change that the policy eventually envisions to see, right? And if you would look at, there is a lot of value in terms of investing in sustainable energy from a gender perspective, as it has multiple implications, not only on the society, not only on the community, but on the economy as a whole. We did discuss about the potential of integration of gender into equal participation of women in the workforce. So for example, it has tremendous potential in increasing the GDP of the country. Now, when it comes to energy policies and practices, like I mentioned very briefly, there are 2-3 things that we really need to focus on. One is really moving from this approach of unconscious targeting of women. So it should not be the case that women ends up being the end users, but they should be seen as conscious target group in both the policies that are aiming at the domestic as well as the productive purposes of energy. Second, if you would look at the women in leadership in these policy making exercises or in policy making areas, you find very limited number of women, right? There was a presentation at the start of this program where it says that there is only certain percentage of women in the jobs that are created in energy, but how many of them are in leadership position? And this is critical because until and unless women are in leadership positions, the policies won't be having a gender lens. Not only in terms of their planning, but also in terms of their execution and financing and monitoring. So of course, the role of women as decision makers at the table is very, very critical. And finally, also the fact that, how can we coordinate with other areas? How can we make a systematic effort in terms of addressing multiple avenues that are key in terms of creating that change. For example, we talk about women walking miles to get water, right, or to collect the fuel wood. So there is a need for a larger collaboration among multiple stakeholders to come together and start, looking at holistically rather than just targeting, aspects in silos. So yeah, of course, I hope I answer your question.
Thank you very much, Ms. Suhela. Then let's say we have formed the perfect gender-specific policy and ASEAN is on the right track to clean energy transition. Do you think the clean energy transition will accelerate closing the gender gap or not? And how so? What is your view, Ms. Suhela?
Sorry, say the last part again. What is the question?
Do you think the clean energy transition will accelerate closing the gender gap or not? And how so?
Yes, of course. Like I said, that if you look at ordinary women's life, right? And I'm coming from a very, very simple example. This aspect of having her spending a lot of time on cooking, So a typical day of a woman starts at 4 a.m. with collecting water, with collecting fuel, looking at and spending a lot of time even in fields, right? I mean, they work as laborers most of the time in agriculture. If they have access to clean again avenues of water where the water is delivered at their doorsteps, and if they have avenues of less drudgerous tools that they can use in their agricultural work, if they have avenues for clean fuel to cook the food and address the needs, the care needs that they look at, of course, these provisions will definitely help better the life of women. And of course, that, when women's life is better, how it has a ripple effect on the society, on the community and economy at large.
Thank you, Ms. Suhela. Ms. Battery, circling back to you, would you like to add on this?
I think just to add on a bit, I think yes, I believe that clean energy transitions helps reduce the gender gaps, especially when during the process, the women are actually being involved as an active agents, as decision maker, as a planner, and not only as the receivers, and as the other panelists have already mentioned. An example is like affordable and clean energy sources for lighting, for food processing, for cooking can significantly contribute to improve health of women and children. And if women can work less hours per day and spend higher proportion of their time on other more productive tasks, so it could help reduce the gender gaps. So allowing women needs to be addressed definitely will increase access, adoptions, and the sustainability of energy within the value chains. And I think to make clean energy transitions is inclusive and sustainable, there is no other way than making women as the active agents throughout the value chain.
Thank you, Ms. Battery, for adding. So going back to the core problem, it remains crucial that regional and national initiatives place a special emphasis on vulnerable groups of women and girls. Given the high number of people who still have no access to clean energy, the ASEAN member states are often identified by international providers of energy access programs, which is mostly financed through development finance. So in short, development finance refers to public source funding, which is used to facilitate private sector investment in countries where the political and commercial risks are too great to attract pure private source capital. Development finance institutions, or in short DFIs, use loans, loan guarantees, equity investments, and other financial products. They include multilateral development banks, national development banks, bilateral development banks, and several other financial institutions. When there is an opportunity, there certainly is a challenge. So, Ms. Battery, if I can go with you again, what do you think are the challenges and the opportunities of development finance in ASEAN?
Thank you, Gabriela, for the questions. I think I want to highlight more into sort of the challenges. I believe the challenges of development finance in ASEAN is not on the funding availability per se. I believe there is an abundant funding available, but the challenge is to increase the awareness and the understanding that there is an urgent need, not only from the project donor, but as well as from other stakeholders, that there are important dimensions, that is gender equality, that need to be considered in the project financing. So to integrate that gender equality in the project selections, in the project procurement, as well as in the project monitoring is key. And then how do we decrease the challenges? Meaning increasing the awareness is basically to highlight the benefit of having a gender related projects. What are the benefits, and highlighting it not only to project donors as well as to the other key stakeholders. And Also, in terms of the opportunities, I think the opportunity lays into the cooperations. Maybe some of the project owners, the project donors, they have limited capacities in terms of gender perspective. So I think cooperation here is key, because allowing cooperation or partnership with capital or service providers who specialize in things like female education, enterprise creations, can speed the progress and increase more financing into gender energy access.
Thank you, Ms. Batari. Ms. Ira, would you like to add?
Yeah, thank you, Gabriela. So basically, what I'd like to highlight here is, when addressing energy needs at the community level, what often happens, what's part of the challenge in financing, I would say, is that often the solutions at community level lack scale, and they lack broader application value because they address very specific community energy needs. But this doesn't mean that they don't need to be financed. So I think part of the challenge with development finance is like moving away from just commercial level indicators, but looking at more holistic indicators that you can capture benefits of energy access to the community as a whole. And even more so when these innovations or solutions do involve the active participation or the leadership of women, that we need to be able to include indicators that, attach value to this, although they don't necessarily have commercial value, and or direct commercial value. And I think, in changing our thinking regarding what qualifies as energy access projects to be financed, I think it's really important to also integrate what the communities themselves, think and want in terms of their energy needs and energy uses. In Indonesia, we understand this as integrating kearifan lokal. And of course, local wisdom has also its applications in other communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ira. Going back to Ms. Suhela, what is your thought on this?
Yeah, thank you. And, one of the things that we are working here at India office is really looking at gender lens investing. So when we are working on gender lens investing, of course, it is not only focused on energy programs, but larger programs that why investment should be flowing towards gender sensitive programming. And, what we realized is that one of the aspects that we looked at is that what is the constitution of women in terms of the private venture and equity capital, firms, and how many women are there in the senior positions there who makes decision on investment. And we realized that it's really in India it was around 7%, but globally an average is of 20%, which also means that if there is a gender imbalance in investment teams, it influences the gender imbalance in portfolio companies as well, meaning that the investment is then does get influenced by who is making the decision. And therefore, what we recognized and realized is that there is a need for greater gender representation at the highest levels in these PV and EC firms, etc. Now, and this is supported by the evidence. So there is a evidence that if there are more women in the senior investment teams, it generates 10 to 20% higher returns for private equity firms and venture capital firms. And this is the IFC report. And if there are companies that have a supplier diversity program, they would generate 133% higher return. So what does this entail? This really entails that, we have to work on the entire ecosystem in order for us to make sure that the funds are flowed towards more gender sensitive projects, including energy products. And good news is that investors are recognizing gender lens investing as a strategy to create value while advancing gender equality. And there is a data that says that the number of gender lens funds has really increased 4 times in last 4 years. But like I said, that more systematic efforts are needed in this direction.
Thank you, Ms. Suhela. But then providing development finance is not up to us, is it? It's really not up to us. It's up to the leaders in ASEAN countries. Then how can ASEAN leaders ensure nations' commitment in addressing the issue between gender and energy access, especially in providing fundings? May I start with you, Ms. Ira?
Hold on. Yeah, thank you. I think this is a really interesting question, and as a person with a public policy background, this is something that I'm always thinking of in terms of how to kind of improve the commitment of our policymakers toward these kind of policies. I think it's really important for our policymakers to take the lead role in foregrounding gender perspectives and energy policies, because my observation is that oftentimes we tend to fall into this pattern of having our development policies dictated by our development partner countries. And as long as we don't take the driving seat in terms of that kind of policy development, and especially when it comes to integrating a meaningful gender lens into our energy policy issues, then the progress that we will achieve will be quite limited. So for example, I welcome the recommendations that you've put forward in the ASEAN Energy and Gender Report to develop an integrated ASEAN roadmap to achieve gender equality, which hopefully provides beyond a normative guidance an impetus for ASEAN member states to hold themselves accountable to gender-specific indicators, including in the energy sector and especially when it concerns energy access projects. And then holding themselves accountable for me also means beyond just having those really nice, beautiful, polished statements in policy documents, but also providing the necessary resources. Now, here in this meeting, we're talking more about the financial resources, but obviously there are other resources that need to be provided, including some that have already been mentioned in your report, which is like the fact that there's still a lack of expertise when it comes to the gender perspective in energy policy. And this is something that if ASEAN leaders were to commit more to gender mainstreaming in energy policy, that they would also be providing the human resources that are necessary in addition to funding and other resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ira. Also inviting Ms. Suhela to give your view on this.
Yes, thank you so much. No, of course, I think the basic argument to guide is, of course, which was presented in the presentation in the beginning as well, around the human rights argument, around the business case argument, but also the sustainable development goals argument, right? I mean, these countries, these member states have committed to have made the normative commitments, right? They have committed to work towards ensuring completion of sustainable development goals. And if they do not, and there is enough evidence that says if gender is not integrated and mainstreamed across all the sustainable development goals, it would not be possible to achieve them. So of course, there is enough critical, argument, if I may say so, available to facilitate this. But of course, I think one of the main areas that is still remain is the fact that it would happen when there is increased representation and effective participation at leadership level in these energy policies, practices, and avenues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Suhela. Ms. Badari, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think in regards to ensuring that the ASEAN leaders to address the issues between gender and energy access, I think One, by setting the target in line with the broader target, Sustainable Development Goals. I think that helps, making sure that to know where we are compared to where we want to be. And then the target cannot only be commercial target, but also be more inclusive to include that gender requirement, so that ASEAN leaders knows whether the policy works, whether there are more initiatives, more action need to be taken into account.
Thank you, Ms. Batari. Ms. Ohela, if I can circle back to you, could you perhaps give us an insight on what kind of policy that should be developed to support the financing of gender energy access programs in ASEAN? If you could give concrete samples.
So I can talk to you through the work that UN Women is leading at this point of time on sustainable financing. And, a lot of emphasis has been on looking at performance-linked bonds or sustainability bonds. And, so what we have done at the global level is to bring the gender guidelines to be integrated in any green bond, say, for example, if they are launched. So a lot of work is around integrating gender into the existing financial products that could have an implication that could, accelerate the development financing towards the energy sector, for example.
Thank you, Ms. Ohela. Perhaps Ms. Ira, would you like to add?
Suhela has mentioned so many relevant points already. I feel like I'm only repeating her if I mention the same points, but maybe to just maybe highlight the fact that when it comes to energy access projects, they cover a spectrum of energy needs, and some projects will have a clear commercial value that that can it would be a very good match to the traditional way we define development finance. But in other cases, there are energy access projects which will address energy needs that don't have clear commercial value as well yet. And it would be necessary for us to, as part of the policy making process, to kind of have broader definitions on what kind of energy access projects deserve development finance.
Thank you, Ms. Ira. If we add another issue on the plate, we know how complicated it is already with the interplay between gender equality, energy access, and economic development. But if we add another issue, the current conflict between Russia and Ukraine, how do you think it would affect the development finance for gender energy access programs in ASEAN? Would any of you like to start?
Maybe I can start. So I think one implication I fear is probably that there will be a reprioritization of security of supply projects, and that would then focus on more of the deployment of more fossil fuel power plants instead of renewable energy deployment. And as you have pointed out in your report, these kind of projects have very little women's participation in them. So this is not a direction that I hope that ASEAN countries are going, but I understand obviously that energy security is currently a big area of concern with the current geopolitical developments.
Thank you, Ms. Ira. Perhaps Ms. Batari, would you like to add?
Yeah, I think Ms. R already mentioned the key point there, to make sure that given this geopolitical circumstances, it's not bring us back toward just simply on energy security, but move toward how to make it more inclusive. If even given this current geopolitical circumstances, it's becoming more imperative as well to include gender perspective in the future financing aspect, as the consequences of conflict, typically women and children are the one that affected the most. Therefore, we must create an urgency to look into how do we benefit women in terms of energy access programs, and not only security per se, but more inclusive.
Thank you, Ms. Badari. Also inviting Ms. Suhela. Would you like to respond?
No, I don't have anything to add. I think
Okay.
it's very relevant responses.
So after the COP26 last year, energy transition is the hot issue now, literally everywhere. It's talking about how we can shift to a low carbon future. So connecting with our discussion point, how does development finance for gender energy programs can help ASEAN to shift to a low carbon future? Perhaps Ms. Badari, would you like to start?
Sorry, Gabriela, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so how does development finance for gender energy programs could help ASEAN to shift to a low carbon future?
All right, I think the targeted development finance can help shift clean energy transitions in more inclusive and sustainable manner. So it's not only any energy projects, but making sure that the funding goes to the right projects that integrate gender dimensions into it is the one that got recognized, get prioritized, so that the benefits will be more inclusive. So I think to move forward in terms of development finance, making sure that the project identifications are there. So meaning integrating the gender dimensions into the project selections and the funding selections.
Thank you, Ms. Badari. Ms. Suhel, what is your thought on this?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, from the perspective of development finance, and especially in the context of Asian countries where there is, trajectory of these countries are really as part of developing, moving towards development. So of course there is a need for development finance, and it would be critical. In fact, it is very, very critical for them to have access to development finance. What is also relevant is to see that how the existing products, existing financial products can also be catered in terms of so for example, if there is a development finance product that is really looking at infrastructure or construction, etc., then really bringing in this aspect of whole feature around integrating gender. And one of our projects that we worked with ADB earlier was really trying to see that, how to bring a gender lens in all of the financial products that are aimed towards infrastructure, towards construction, because of course, these are those industries, or these are those sectors that have a higher energy requirement, right? So then the prerequisite is that if the banks, say, for example, or if the organizations who come up with these financing opportunities for nations, they need to integrate, already starting to integrate a gender lens to see that certain percentage of it goes towards ensuring that the gender needs are properly addressed. So of course, so there are two aspects. One is that the implication of development finance on the energy transition, but also a gender responsive energy transition.
Thank you, Ms. Suhela. Circling back to you, Ms. Ira, would you like to add? Would you like to respond?
I think my panelists have covered everything, so I'll leave it at that.
Okay, then well, time sure flies when we have fun. Well, I sure did have fun, and I hope everyone too. To end the panel discussion session, I would like to invite each of the panelists to give perhaps 2 minutes your final view on the way forward for ASEAN to provide financial means for gender energy access programs. So let's start with Ms. Badari.
Thank you, Gabriela. For final remarks, I think I want to highlight 2 points. I think from business perspective, we have discussed extensively, and there are growing body of evidence that there are links between increased gender equality with stronger business outcomes, more innovation, higher productivity, and making sure that we are tapping into women's contributions, not only as the users but also as the decision maker, as the leaders. I think these can strengthen the energy sector more holistically, so we can bring about an inclusive economic and social development. I think my second and final point is that, again, I want to emphasize that energy access and energy transitions are not gender neutral. So, and making sure that everyone understand that and internalize that, and because women's and men varied experience with norms, institutions, and the relation with household and communities, and the roles they play, and how women and men benefit from energy and new technologies differ. So it's imperative for stakeholders, project donors, and everyone to enable and promote, provide financing to more energy projects and investment that integrate gender perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Battery. Ms. Ira, passing the microphone to you.
Thank you, Gabriela. I would like to echo what Ms. Batari has already said, and essentially that energy access, energy transition is not a gender neutral issue, and there needs to be deliberate policies and interventions that are put in place by policymakers as well as businesses and project developers to ensure that there is a gender perspective included in a meaningful manner in energy access projects. I'd also like to make the point that, similar to what Batari has already said, women have demonstrated a lot of agency when it comes to alleviating energy poverty issues. So we need to put more effort into giving those kind of roles the formal recognition that they deserve. And this would be moving beyond the participation of women in energy access projects to kind of encouraging more leadership roles for women in these projects, also at the community level and at the political level. Also, representing an education institution. Obviously, I think it's really important that education institutions play the role of developing the next generation of gender and energy leaders. And yes, I think finally, I feel that financing of energy access projects needs to be informed and driven by national priorities. And we shouldn't be dependent on our development partners for that.
Thank you, Ms. Ira. Ms. Suhela, your final thoughts.
Yeah, of course. I think we really need to socialize the nexus between gender energy more, so that there is a relevant base is created. There are a lot of interventions that are easy, but we have not, I think, still socialized enough at the ASEAN level. If I talk about at the regional, at the sub-regional level, the kind of interventions that are being done. So we really need to socialize them. And of course, I completely agree with Vira's point that, apart from development partners, we do need to get more public commitment in terms of integrating gender into the energy projects.
Thank you, Ms. Suhela. And again, thank you very much to all three amazing panelists who have allocated your precious time and share your insights with us. Also, highest appreciation to Ms. Kristen Lins and Ms. Filda Yusgiantoro for the insightful key messages earlier. It was indeed a very interesting discussion. However, due to the limited time, we have to stop here. I look forward to a stronger collaboration to advance gender equality in the ASEAN energy sector. Together, we can break the bias. Once again, thank you very much, and passing the floor back to Helena.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gabriela. That was a very insightful panel discussion, and I'm sure all of you will agree. Now, the report and presentation materials from this session will be ready for viewing and download within this week, or maximum probably early next week. Please check back to ACE website in a few days for its availability. In addition to that, The 3 energy insights are also available on our website. And we have the 2021 recap on electricity, renewable energy, and oil and gas. Do check the links in the screen to discover how these 3 sectors performed throughout 2021. We have also released an outlook report on the ASEAN Energy in 2022, which presents the key insights about the energy landscape in ASEAN for this year, including the post-pandemic recovery and the comparison between pre and post-COP26, among others. Accompanying the outlook report is the regional survey results, which is a compilation of public energy insights given by almost 200 respondents all over the world regarding the energy trends in 2021, the outlook, challenges, and opportunities for the energy sector in 2022 and beyond. Today's session is supported by the ASEAN Climate Change and Energy Project, or as we call it, ACCEPT. One of ACCEPT's activities is the ASEAN Researchers Network on Energy and Climate Change. It is a group of scholars, analysts, and other stakeholders gathered in an interdisciplinary forum for the discussion on social, economic, governance, and technical issues related to the energy and climate change. For more details, please visit the links as shown in your screen. Distinguished guests and participants, ladies and gentlemen, now we have reached the end of the webinar. Once again, on behalf of ACE, I would like to thank all speakers and participants for the extensive discussion today on ACE's first ever Gender Energy Report launch. Although we are approaching the end of the month of International Women's Day, I hope we all will still carry the spirit forward to advance women empowerment from whichever sector we are working on. Only as a collective will we be able to break the bias. I hope you all stay safe, stay healthy, and hope to see you soon. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much for your presence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.